President Donald Trump set off on his first international trip this week to the Middle East and Europe. He may be hoping to leave behind a political firestorm ignited by his firing of FBI Director James Comey. Reports he pressed Comey to end the investigation of his former national security advisor Michael Flynn and his reported sharing of classified intelligence with Russia. VOA National Correspondent Jim Malone has more.
We're going to meetings right now.
Another chaotic day at the White House as reporters grill President Trump over his decision to share classified intelligence with Russian officials.
Good morning, everybody.
Each day seems to bring a new crisis, including reports that Trump pressed the former FBI Director James Comey to drop his probe of fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and the shifting White House explanations for the recent firing of Comey. While dispensing advice to Coast Guard cadets at their commencement in Connecticut Wednesday, the president fired back at his critics and the news media.
No politician in history, and I say this with great surety, has been treated worse or more unfairly. You can't let them get you down. You can't let the critics and the naysayers get in the way of your dreams.
With the White House in turmoil, Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer wonders whether the president can be believed.
There's a crisis of credibility in this administration, which will hurt us in ways almost too numerous to elaborate. At the top of the list are an erosion of trust in the presidency and trust in America by our friends and allies.
And joining me now to break all this down via Skype from the White House, Bill Gallo of VOA News, and in our D.C. studio, VOA National Security correspondent Jeff Seldin. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. So there's plenty to talk about. So first to you, Bill, at the White House. Is the president having what Schumer called a crisis of credibility? And, if so, how's he get out of it?
Well, it's really unclear at this point. I mean, scandals and crises are nothing new for the Trump presidency or the Trump presidential campaign. But what was new this past week, was that these scandals seem to be now taking a path that is a little bit outside of the control of Trump. He's long deflected. He's long tried to distract, create other big news stories to distract from whenever things have gone wrong for him. But it now appears after, the events of the last week, he may not be able to control the narrative so easily. You have the existence of these Comey memos that were reported by several news outlets. You now have a special counsel that's looking into, Russian influence in the election, as well as any possible collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians. These are things now that will happen outside of Trump's control. You sense maybe even that he realizes that a little bit. He really him and his staff made less of an attempt to really even go out there and defend these actions this week in the media. We'll see what happens now as he leaves on his foreign trip, though.
Well, that's a good point. He is leaving on this foreign trip then, Bill. Will that take this off the mind of the American people? That's a distraction in itself, right? He's going to Israel, he's going to Rome, he's going to Saudi Arabia. Won't that be off the news cycle then?
Well, the White House certainly hopes that it will. And in fact, in Trump's press conference yesterday, he repeatedly said, look, this is a witch hunt, but this is something that now, it will take its course, and I'm going to focus on what I want to do for this country. He really wants to get back to what his agenda is. Will that happen? As I mentioned, some things are out of his control now, so we don't know what the next development will be. But also on this foreign trip, it's important to know he's going to Saudi Arabia, where he'll give a speech on Islam. That's not something that is, without risk. I mean, this is a presidential candidate who, during his campaign, called for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims into the United States. He later went back on that, changed that proposal. But, this is not risk-free by any means. He's also going to the Vatican. He clashed with the Pope during the presidential campaign. The relationship there seems better now, but there's no guarantee this will go smoothly.
So, Bill, you mentioned something about a special counsel. The special counsel has been appointed, former FBI Director Robert Mueller, and that's to look into the connection, if there's any connection, between Russia and the election with the Trump campaign. Jeff, let me turn to you now. How's this special counsel work? How does it exactly go into play in this investigation?
Well, we have to understand there are some unique circumstances here. Already from the get-go, the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, recused himself from any of the Russian investigations because of his meetings with the Russian ambassador to the U.S., Kislyak. So then you have the Deputy Attorney General, Rosenstein, who comes on and is under immense pressure and is involved in the mini scandal about writing the memo that helps Trump justify firing the FBI Director James Comey when he did. So earlier this week, the Deputy AG comes out and points this to special counsel. And what he says in his statement is that based upon the unique circumstances, the public interest requires me, and this again, what his quote, to place this investigation under the authority of a person who exercises a degree of independence outside the normal chain of command. So basically, by appointing this special counsel, you have somebody coming in who's very well versed. You have a former FBI director, a well-known, reputable lawyer, Robert Mueller, who can come in, take a look at this. He's going to be able to take the FBI agents who are already working on the investigation, and he's going to be able to delve into some of this without the aura of political interference, without the scandals, if you will, that with the reports that Trump asked Comey to lay off in the investigation or see his way clear of ending this investigation against his former National Security Advisor, General Flynn. So this will give a degree of independence to the investigation. It gives a renewed degree of credibility, I think, is what they're hoping from the investigation. It takes it out of all the political turmoil.
Someone unbiased, someone who is external.
Yeah,
and it gives him freedom, too, right, to investigate broader areas.
Right. If you look at the order that came with the appointment of the special counsel, he's allowed to look at any links or coordination between the Russian government and individuals, including those associated with the Trump campaign. And it also says he's going to be charged with looking at, quote, any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, which gives him a pretty wide scope. If you look at previous special counsels, like the situation with Watergate, the investigation into the break-in at Watergate and the investigation of then President Nixon, the charges that ultimately led Nixon to resign weren't the initial charges. So in this case, the former FBI director, Robert Mueller, has the ability to look at things, and if he finds different threads, if he finds things that look suspicious, he's going to be able to pursue those leads. In the investigation, the hope is we'll just see justice done, whether there's something there or whether there's not something there.
Good point. And also, people are worried that this will extend it, though. This will make the investigation extend out months, hopefully not years, but that remains to be seen. Let's go back on that memo that you referred to just a bit, the fact that Comey is saying that he took notes after he met with President Trump, and President Trump said something about letting it go, talking about his national security advisor. It alludes to the fact that maybe he didn't want him to investigate, but Comey is expected to be in a public hearing this coming week where he'll be asked those questions, and also already President Trump has said no, he wasn't asking that. So we might have a he said kind of investigation going on here. Any comment on that? Bill, what do you say? I mean, if it is just he said this and he disagrees with it, will we ever have a closure to this matter?
It's not clear, and we don't really know even what Comey will say. But the existence of these memos is possibly something that is extremely relevant here. We don't know what the memos say. There's only been a couple of news reports on them. He is said to have taken very thorough notes and was said to be very concerned about some of the things that Trump actually was pressuring him to do. Of course, Trump denies that. There will be an element of he said, as you mentioned, but we don't really know how that's going to play out, I guess.
And the one thing you have to prove with obstruction of justice is also intent, which will be very difficult to prove in this case, being that it was verbal and it was in a meeting. Very quickly, Jeff, with all these controversies, is Russia laughing at us?
Well, there's a high degree of suspicion among former intelligence officials, some current intelligence officials, that Russia is getting exactly what it wanted. Now, when you look at the unclassified report that was put out by the intelligence community about what Russia wanted, their interference in the presidential election, it was that ultimately they wanted Trump to win. But what does Russia want most of all? It wants its enemies in chaos. It wants them having difficulties so it can move ahead with its agenda, whatever it may be. So there are some who think that Russia has exactly what it wants and that Putin is laughing all the way to the bank.
Thank you so much, Jeff and Bill. Fascinating discussion. We are taking a short break now, but when we come back, the possibility that President Trump may soon be ratcheting up U.S. troop involvement in Afghanistan. Stay tuned. This This is The Correspondents on Voice of America.